us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion.
What is the cause of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all karmis engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them?
The Yamaduta.
In this verse now.
Yamaduta Uchuhu.
Veda pranihito dharmo.
Veda pranihito dharmo.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Yamaduta uchuhu.
Yamaduta Uchuhu.
Veda pranihito dharmo.
Veda pranihito dharmo.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Yamaduta uchuhu.
Yamaduta Uchuhu.
Veda pranihito dharmo.
Veda pranihito dharmo.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Swayambhur iti shushruma. Yamaduta Uchuhu. Veda pranihito dharmo.
He adharmastar viparyaya.
Hi adharmastad viparyayaha. Vedo narayana sakshat.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Swayambhur iti shushruma. Yamaduta Uchuhu. Vedo pranihito dharmo.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Yamaduta Uchuhu.
Yamaduta Uchuhu.
Veda pranahito dharmo.
Veda pranihito dharmo. Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Yadharmastad viparyayaha.
Vedo narayana sakshat.
Swayambhur iti sushruma.
Swayambhur iti shushruma.
Yamaduta uchuhu.
Yamaduta Uchuhu.
The order carriers of Yamaraj said,
The order carriers of Yamaraj said,
Veda.
Veda.
By the four Vedas.
By the four Vedas.
Sama, Yajur, Rig, and Atharva.
Sama, Yajur, Rig, and Atharva.
Pranihita.
Pranihita.
Prescribed.
Prescribed.
Dharma.
Dharma.
Religious principles.
Religious principles.
He.
He.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Adharma.
Adharma.
Irreligious principles.
Irreligious principles.
Tat viparyayaha.
Tad viparyayaha.
The opposite of that.
The opposite of that.
That which is not supported by Vedic injunctions.
That which is not supported by Vedic injunctions.
Vedaha.
Vedaha.
The Vedas.
The Vedas.
Books of knowledge.
Books of knowledge.
Narayanaha sakshat.
Narayanaha sakshat.
Directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Being the words of Narayana.
Being the words of Narayana.
Swayam Bhuhu.
Swayambhu.
Self-born.
Self-born.
Self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient.
Appearing only from the breath of Narayana.
Appearing only from the breath of Narayana.
And not being learned from anyone else.
And not being learned from anyone else.
Iti.
Iti.
Thus.
Thus.
Shushruma.
Shushruma.
We have heard.
We have heard.
The Yamadutas replied, that which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes dharma, the religious principles. And the opposite of that is irreligion. The Vedas are directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, and are self-born. This we have heard from Yamaraj. Purport. The servants of Yamaraj replied quite properly. They did not manufacture principles of religion or irreligion. Instead, they explained what they have heard from the authority, Yamaraj. Mahajano yena gata sapanta. One should follow the Mahajan, the authorized person. Yamaraj is one of 12 authorities. Therefore, the servants of Yamaraj, the Yamadutas, replied with perfect clarity when they said, Shushrama, we have heard. The members of modern civilization manufacture defective religious principles through speculative concoction. This is not dharma. They do not know what is dharma and what is adharma. Therefore, as stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, dharma projita kaita botra, dharma not supported by the Vedas is rejected from Srimad Bhagavad Dharma. Bhagavad Dharma comprises only that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhagavad Dharma is sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. One must accept the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender to him and whatever he says. This is dharma. Arjuna, for example, thinking that violence was adharma, was declining to fight. But Krishna urged him to fight. Arjuna abided by the orders of Krishna, and therefore he is actually adharmi, because the order of Krishna is dharma. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15.15, Vedaisha sarvairaham eva vedya. The real purpose of Veda knowledge is to know me. One who knows Krishna perfectly is liberated. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 4.9,
Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo vedi tattvata tattva punam janma neti mameti so Arjuna.
one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. One who understands Krishna and abides by his order is a candidate for returning home back to Godhead. It may be concluded that dharma, religion, refers to that which is ordered in the Vedas, and adharma, irreligion, refers to that which is not supported in the Vedas. Dharma is not actually manufactured by Narayana. As stated in the Vedas, Asya Mahato Bhutasya Nishva Sitam Etad Yad Rigveda Iti. The injunctions of dharma emanate from the breathing of Narayan, the supreme living entity. Narayan exists eternally and breathes eternally, and therefore dharma, the injunctions of Narayana, also exist eternally. Srila Madhvacharya, the original Acharya for those who belong to the Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, says, Vedanam
Pratamo vakta harireva yato vibhu ato vishnavatma veda iti ahurveda vadinaha.
The transcendental words of the Vedas emanated from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Vedic principles should be understood to be Vaishnava principles, because Vishnu is the origin of the Vedas. The Vedas contain nothing besides the instructions of Vishnu, and one who follows the Vedic principles is a Vaishnava. The Vaishnava is not a member of a manufactured community of this material world. A Vaishnava is a real knower of the Vedas, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Vedaisha sarvairaham eva vedya. I'd like to recite the full Mangalasharan if that's okay. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Viranayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sahajatam Sadhana Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parigana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Vadha Sadhana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vidamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Apta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa
सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः।
जय श्री
कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna, everyone. Please accept my humble obeisances. So we are continuing on the pastime of Ajamo today, and we have come to the point where the Vishnu Dutas are challenging the Yama Dutas. They're saying, if you really proclaim to be making the right decision here, then explain to us what is dharma. And it's important for the Yamadutas to understand what dharma is because they have a really important task. They're determining who they need to take the Yamaraj and who they don't need to worry about. What is another name of Yamaraj? Does anyone know? Dharmaraj, that's right. The king of Dharma. That's another one of his names, Dharmaraj. And so it's important for his servants to understand what Dharma is. There's an important way that they presented this knowledge, and that's the last sentence of the translation. It's, "This we have heard from Yamaraj." I'm thinking of speaking on this point first because there's a certain way in which Vedic knowledge is presented, and they've actually done this very properly here. There's 3 different kinds of Brahman, or knowledge that can be acquired. Does anyone know the 3 different Brahmans, the names of them?
Brahman, Paramatma.
Guru, Shadra,
Prabhu was close, yeah.
Yeah. Brahman, Paramatma.
शब्द प्रमाण, अनुमान प्रमाण, and शब्द अनुमान
And Pratyaksha Brahman.
and प्रत्यक्ष.
These are the 3 different ways of acquiring knowledge. The first one is Pratyaksha Brahman, and that's knowledge that is acquired through sensory perception. So just by using our senses, our 5 senses, we can gain certain knowledge about the world. But this is prone to contamination by what? There's 4 defects that contaminate this kind of way of acquiring knowledge. Would anyone like to say the 4 defects? The 4 defects, yes. Yeah.
Commit mistakes, be bewildered by illusion, and then imperfect senses, and the C was
The last one starts with C.
C, yeah. Commit mistakes, illusory energy.
Tendency to cheat others.
Yes. That's
Cheat,
right.
yeah, cheat others.
Tendency to cheat. So these 4 defects make it so that our Pratyaksha Brahman is imperfect. It is not possible for us to ascertain the proper understanding of the world just through our sensory perception. And so above this is Anuman Brahman, and this is to gain knowledge through inductive reasoning. Srila Prabhupada describes this in some places as, it may be like this, it may be like that, but this is speculation. Logicians and philosophers now have very formal methods of propositional logic, saying that we go from this premise to that premise. If this must be true, then this must be true. But ultimately, this is still prone to defect because of our 4 defects that we have. And if our premises are wrong, we may lead to the incorrect conclusion. And ultimately, this is more speculative. And so the highest form of knowledge is Shabda Praman. And that is knowledge which is received through oral reception, which started from Krishna, then to Brahma, then to Narada, to Vyasadeva, and so on. And this is the highest form of knowledge because it is passed down from the perfect source through transparent mediums, and that's our sampradaya. And so by saying that this we have heard from Yamaraj, they have in a way exonerated themselves, saying that we don't know anything, but this is what we heard from Yamaraj. So they're actually showing a very humble attitude here. They're not professing to be, they're not making any concoction of their own, they're not professing to be a greater authority than the Vishnu Dutas. So in the verse, there's the last line, Swayambhur iti Shushrama. And this word iti Shushrama is a very common phrase in many other verses. So one such verse is in the 13th verse of the Sri Upanishad. Anya devahu sambhavad, anya dapura sambhavad, iti Shushrama giranam yenasta vishashakshire. Can we pull that up? Isha 13.
Upanishad 13.
One second.
Anyways. I also find it somewhat interesting that the way they define dharma is saying that which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes dharma. And then instead of defining a religion, they said the opposite of that is irreligion. Or the opposite of what is prescribed in the Vedas is irreligion. This kind of definition is actually quite common. We can go to the translation of this verse first. There's a similar concept here. They're saying one result is obtained by worshipping the supreme cause of all causes, and another result is obtained by worshipping that which is not supreme. So in order to define that dharma, they've simply said it's the opposite of dharma. So if you go up a little bit to the verse, it's the phrase there, iti Shushrama, that we can see in the third line. Yes. The same phrase is used. This we have heard from Yamaraj. What's the, it says, thus, there it is. Thus, I heard it. So this is the proper way that we should be presenting our philosophy. That when we present that this is the highest source of knowledge, that we present it in such a way that we're saying this is what we've heard from our higher authorities. And that's what gives it authenticity. To say that it comes out of our own material concoction would be incorrect. It degrades the knowledge if it comes from an imperfect source. So how do we know who is the right authority? How do we know who we should hear from? In this verse it says, Iti Shushruma Dhiranam. Dhiranam means from the undisturbed authorities. Adhira is one who is sober and steady, one who, in spite of provocation, is not disturbed. In other words, someone who is a Goswami. Go means the senses, and Swami means master. So Goswami is the master of the senses. On the other hand, Godas is servant of the senses. There are some examples of Dhiras mentioned in the Shastra. One example that Srila Prabhupada quotes a few times is the example of Shiva. So there was a time when the demigods were fighting the demons. Well, that's not really one time, it's kind of eternal. But this one time when the demigods were fighting the demons, the demigods were losing. They weren't doing well. And so they wanted someone to be commander-in-chief. And that person, they wanted to be born from Shiva. So they needed someone to approach him asking, we need a son. And unfortunately, Shiva was very deep in meditation. He was completely entranced, he's perfect Vaishnava, so it's not easy to break him away from his meditation. So they sent Parvati to try to get to talk to him. And at this time, Parvati was a very young girl. And so Srila Prabhupada describes that Parvati, in order to get him to get out of his meditation, she tried to agitate his senses. So she decided to worship his genitals and touch them in a way that would wake him up. But he was completely sober the entire time. And so he is the perfect example of a Goswami, or someone who has controlled his senses. Another example that is given is that of Haridas Thakur, and this is very similar to the story of Jano, because there was one time a prostitute who decided to disturb Haridas Thakur. So someone had something against Haridas Thakur, didn't like him, and decided to send a prostitute to break him away from his meditation. So the prostitute would come, and she would say, let's enjoy. And Haridas Thakur would say, yeah, sure, we can do that, but let me just finish my rounds. And, once I'm done, then we can enjoy it. Unfortunately for her, Haridas Thakur's chanting was a full-day activity every day. He would chant 300,000 names. That's about 192 rounds, approximately. If you think about how much time that would take, that's pretty much the entire day. He would only sleep for a couple hours, and then the rest of the day he'd be chanting. So the prostitute would come every day, and then Haridas Thakur would say, let me just finish my rounds. And at the end of the day, he would say, actually, I'm not done. Can you come tomorrow? So, I'm not yet done. So after a few days, this prostitute said, actually, I'm kind of done with this. Someone sent me to break away from your meditation, but you seem to be just chanting all the time. And Haridas Thakur said, I let you stay for these few days for your own purification. And then he gave her beads and said, you should now start chanting. And in this way, she was given instruction from Gita. So this is the proper way that we have in Shastra on how to react when faced with a prostitute. And in the story of Ujjwala, we have both examples of how we should react to material disturbances. So this is the qualification of one who can give us Vedic knowledge. Is someone who has controlled the senses. There's a verse from Nectar of Instruction which exemplifies this. We can pull it up. It's the first verse from the database. Vacho vegam manasaha krodha vegam jihva vegam udarapastha vegam etan vegam yogishahita thira sarvam apimam prithivim sashishya. So in this verse it says that one who has control of the 6 urges is qualified to make disciples all over the world. And we can read what those 6 urges are in the translation. Would someone like to read the translation? Yes.
A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demand, the action of anger, and the urge of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world.
And then if you see in the purport here, the first line is a reference to the same chapter we're reading right now. 6th Canto, 1st chapter. So towards the beginning of the chapter, Parikshit Maharaj was criticizing people who simply do atonement for wrongful deeds that they've done. That they would commit sinful activities, and then afterwards they would just pray and then chant, to kind of get rid of that. Which offense do you think does this remind you of from the 10 offenses? 7. That's correct. The 7th offense is to commit sinful acts on the strength of the holy name. So at the beginning of this purport here, there's an example given of a thief. So someone who is intelligent, all they need to know is someone can just tell them, you shouldn't steal. It says this in the scriptures. It's not the right thing to do. Such a person is considered intelligent. One who is less intelligent than that will steal and then realize the consequences. They may be thrown into jail. And then afterwards they decide, I'm going to steal. And then a person who is a rascal, those are Srila Prabhupada's words, a person who is a rascal decides to, even after they get thrown into jail several times, they'll still commit the same offenses. And this is somewhat similar to our story in a way. We've been eternally conditioned, lifetime after lifetime, we've been given the opportunity to make best use of our time, but still we haven't gotten there. We're getting there now. But this is, the process of atonement. Srila Prabhupada gives, or he quotes Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj describes this as an elephant who goes into the water and takes a bath, and then after coming out of the water, takes dirt and then throws it on himself. So there's no use of this. This is the result of the 7th offense of the holy name. So this verse being described here is in the very beginning of the Nectar of Instruction. This is the qualification of a spiritual master. So upon reading this my first time, a question I had was, why is this being said in the very beginning? Most devotees, when they first start learning about Bhakti, they're not ready to be spiritual masters. So why is the qualification of a spiritual master being given in the very first verse? And the answer is that we must know how to discern who to hear from. And so the qualification of a spiritual master is important for us to know, because only then we can acquire real knowledge. So if we can find someone who has controlled these 6 urges, then this is the right person, the right authority that we should listen from. Such an authority is very rare though. It's said in Bhagavad Gita, we can pull it up, 7th chapter, 19th verse. Bahunam janma namante jnanaman mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvavidhi samahatma sudurlabha. Translation is, would someone like to read the translation? Yes.
After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare.
Right, so Samahatma Sudurlabha means such a great soul is very rare. In Sanskrit, Durlabha means rare, and whenever Su is added to the beginning of a word, it increases its magnitude. So Susukam means very happy. So Sudurlabha means very rare. So this kind of person who has control in all the six senses is a very rare soul. So if you ever find such a soul, it's important for us to latch on to their lotus feet and to take complete shelter of them. We can also go to Bhagavad Gita 9.13. Mahatma Nasima Bhakta Naigam Prakriti Mashrita Ajantyana Nimanso Yatra Bhutadam Avyayam. So one of the ways that we can determine whether a person is the right person for us to hear from is we can simply observe what results they've achieved. So in the same way that if you take a medication, you determine whether it's successful or not by whether it alleviates your symptoms. So in a similar way, if someone's symptoms of material hankering have reduced, and if they're fully engaged in devotional service, then we can deduce that they're the right person to listen from, because their process that they're practicing is actually working. Can someone do the translation of this verse? Yeah, go ahead.
O son of Pratha, those who are not deluded, the great souls are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible.
So these souls are not deluded, and they are fully engaged in devotional service. So to control the senses fully naturally results in one to be fully engaged in devotional service, because you're engaging all of your senses in devotional service. Coming back to the verse that we're reading today, the Yamadutas have their perception of what dharma is. It says that which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes dharma, the religious principles, and the opposite of that is irreligion. So for our lives, how do we determine whether what we're performing is correct or not? You know, we perform so many activities, and we want to know if they are in line with dharma or if they're not in line. So there's a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam which perfectly elucidates this. You can pull it up. It's 1.2.8. Dharma svanushrita pumsam vishvaksena kathasuya notpati vedadiratim shrama evahi kevalam. This verse comes in the chapter where Sukha Goswami is answering a lot of questions from the sages. They ask him 6 questions. So these are some pretty fire verses here. The essence of bhakti is encapsulated into this chapter. Okay, can you go to the verse, yes. So I'm trying to quote as many verses as possible that have the word karma in it, because that's the topic at hand. So the dharma svanushrita means whatever occupation one performs according to one's position, yadi if it does not increase one's rati, one's attraction for vishvaksena katha, for the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then shrama evahi kevalam. It is eva certainly and kevalam entirely, shrama useless. That's a pretty strong statement. It's essentially saying that anything which you do, if it doesn't increase your attraction for Krishna, then it is certainly and entirely useless. If you look at the word shrama here, here we live in an ashram, and in Sanskrit, if you put a in front of a word, it gives it the opposite meaning. And so ashram means it's a place where you make best use of your time. So then what would shrama be?
Not to make the best use of time.
Waste of time.
Shrama means work.
Right. Shrama is if you live in an ashram, it's the most productive labor you can do. You're making best use of time. So if you take out that thought from the beginning, it's the opposite meaning. So what does it become now? Right. It becomes useless labor. So it's saying here that anything which you do which is not increasing your attraction for Krishna is certainly an entirely useless labor. When I first heard this, I started to analyze my life a bit, because I'm doing so many things which I consider to be things I kind of have to do, because they're my material obligations. But unless I find a way to connect that to Krishna, and unless I'm thinking of Krishna as doing this all as a service to him, then it's actually useless labor. So I thought this was an important point. So one point here is that in Shastra there's many definitions of dharma given. The Yamadutas have their own conception. In Bhagavatam we have the highest form of dharma being described. So a question that might arise is, why are there so many different definitions for the same thing? They're all correct if they come from the right source, but there's different depths of understanding for the same point. And the reason for this is because shiksha is given according to the adhikar of the shishya, which means that instruction is given according to the qualification of the student. And that's why it's really important for us to have a guru as well, have a spiritual master, because the spiritual master knows what is the right thing to say for the right kind of person. And the spiritual master speaks to you at the level which you are at. There's an example from Srimad Bhagavatam, which I think it also exemplifies this very well. There was this one time when Narada was traveling, as he normally does, and he saw a hunter named Mrigari. And Mrigari was one of the most cruel hunters ever. Instead of killing animals, he would shoot them and then leave them half dead, so that they suffer, and that it's kind of a sadistic desire to allow them to suffer and then eventually die after experiencing a lot of pain. So Narada Muni was was traveling and he saw this, and he decided he should say something to Mrigari. So he approached Mrigari, and he told Mrigari, I have something to ask of you. Mrigari said, yeah, I have full assortment of deer skin, snake skin, lion skin, just tell me what you want, I have everything. But he said no. And the first thing he told him is, I want you to fully kill these animals. And I think it's an important point here, because if we take that out of context, and we can say, well, Narada Muni instructed someone to fully kill animals, and so therefore, that's a direct instruction given by him. But the reason he gave this instruction to Mrigari is because that was the right instruction for the level that he was at. For us, that would be a step down, but for him, that was a step up. He was going from half killing animals to now fully killing animals. And so this is why a guru knows what is the right thing to say to the right kind of person. Otherwise, if he told Mrigari, Bhakti is the supreme most dharma, you should give this up and just start chanting, that might not have been the right instruction at that point in time. Eventually, Mrigari turned into a devotee, but at this point in time, what he needed to hear was just one step above where he was at. Thankfully for us, we have the highest form of dharma, which is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the first canto, 2nd chapter, 6th verse, Savaya Pumsam Karo Dharmo, Edo Bhakti Radhokshaje, Ahaitupi Apratiyata, Eyatma Suprasidati. Who would like to read this verse? Yes.
Translation. The supreme occupation dharma for all humanity is that by which man can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the same.
So here the supreme dharma is being described, and that dharma is bhakti. It is loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord, and such service must be continuous. It must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. And this is the case because anything which we do has to be in line with our supreme goal of life, and that is Krishna Bhakti or Krishna Prema. So anything which is not in line with it should not be performed. Otherwise, it is simply like cleaning the cage but forgetting to take care of the bird. Everything which we do must be serving the actual needs of the soul. In the purport to this verse, you can try looking it up. Control F. It says, you look up the word sustain.
What should I search?
Sustain. Yeah. We have purposely denoted dharma as occupation because the root meaning of the word dharma is that which sustains one's existence. A living being's sustenance of existence is to coordinate his activities with his eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. So real dharma means to perform bhakti, to connect with Krishna. Krishna is the sustainer of everyone, and so to sustain one's existence means to connect oneself with the sustainer of everything. And so the Yamadutas have thankfully presented to us the proper way of receiving knowledge, and that's through oral reception, by hearing from the right source. And if we're able to practice this ourselves, it is our duty to find the right authority to listen from, and it is our duty to follow them very sincerely. Are there any questions or comments on any of these points? Yes.
Yes. Prabhu, you mentioned the story of Mrigai, right? So, and also we have seen like the Narad Muni, converting a lot of people into devotees, like normal people or sinful people who have committed a lot of sins, and also we have heard the story of this Jagai and Nalai. So it seems like a pure devotee can make anyone into a devotee. Given that that person follows the instruction. So is that correct? What I understand? I just want to know.
Yes, that's definitely correct. The effect of a pure devotee is that the bhakti from a pure devotee gets transferred into the heart of those that he associates with. Not fully, but the effect that a pure devotee has on someone, it said that even the touch of a pure devotee can induce bhakti in a person. Even though just being in the presence of a pure devotee is very uplifting. Can we look at the 16th verse of the second chapter, first canto?
116.
1 to 16. Shushushusharadhanasya vasudevakatharuchi sammahasya vedadaprapunyatiyathanishevana. Alright. Who would like to read this? Yes. Oh, Prabhu in the back.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Translation. O wise non-sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva.
So the best thing that one can do is to serve the devotees. That's how one gains affinity for the messages of Vasudeva. I'm quoting this because you mentioned Narad Muni has that kind of effect on people. And he gained this himself by serving the devotees. When he was in another life, when he was a little boy, he had pure sadhus, Vishnu Bhaktas who came to his home, and he spent months and months hearing from them and serving them. And so this is the way that we gain affinity for hearing about Krishna, is by being an association of devotees. Any other comments or questions?
I had a doubt in previous step was open in the translation. Translation. Yeah, what does this line mean? Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the soul.
Yeah. So unmotivated doesn't mean unmotivated is kind of slightly confusing. It might be at first. Unmotivated means that it does not have an external motive. It's not motivated by a desire to gain material wealth or a desire to make oneself seem very good towards others. It means that this desire is coming purely from a place of wanting to serve Krishna. It's pure bhakti. That's what unmotivated means. And uninterrupted means that it should be happening all the time. Everything that you do every day should be, in the ideal stage, everything that you do should be related to bhakti. It should be for Krishna.
So we transform from motivated to unmotivated. First we start from motivated, then we get to unmotivated, right?
Yeah, I would term it as a material motive. So unmotivated means to have no material motive.
Okay.
Yeah. As far as uninterrupted, Srila Rupa Goswami gives us the essence of all advice in the 8th verse of the Nectar of Instruction. We can pull that verse up too. B.V. Govinda Maharaj quoted this verse in his class. Tannamarupa charitadi sukirtananu smrityo kramena rasana manasi niyojya tishthan braje tadanuragi jananugami kalam nayeda khidamityupadesha saram. 8th verse, Nectar of Instruction.
I know I NOI 8.
Okay. So I'm quoting this because I think it explains what it means to. It's building off of the point of uninterrupted. What it means to engage in Krishna Bhakti 24 hours a day. Who would like to read this?
The essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Raj, Golok, Vrindavan, Ram, and serve Krishna under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this comes in the 8th verse because the first 7 verses of Nectar of Instruction pertain to Vaidhi Sadhana, or Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, which means that the actions of Bhakti are motivated by implicit faith in the meaning of the scripture. Now that we come to the 8th verse here, this is now getting into Raganuga Bhakti, in which devotional service is spontaneous. And so for the Raganuga Bhaktas, to think of Krishna 24 hours a day does not take external endeavor. It's very natural for such a devotee. Their very nature is Krishna Bhakti. And so it is, this is the stage that we can aspire for at some point, to be constantly thinking of Krishna and serving him.
In Grasta it is possible, 24 hours a day. If we don't chant, we can remember.
Could you read that one more time, sorry? The beginning part of your question?
I'm saying in Grasta life, we have to do job and everything. So chanting is, I don't think it's possible because we have to talk and like 24 hours a day. So we can remember 24 hours a day.
Yes, we can remember. You can remember that in any service that we do, that we're doing it for Krishna. Simply labeling the accusation of bhakti makes something into bhakti. So if I say I'm doing this for Krishna, then it becomes bhakti. As long as it's favorable devotional service and not sinful.
One mentioned that how can we remember by doing our occupational duty? So how do we know that we are doing this because it's our duty, not in the garb of doing the duty, we are not doing sense enjoyment. So how do we kind of differentiate between both of them?
So how do we differentiate between? How do we not become contaminated by what we're doing? Is that what you're saying? Or how do we not have it turn into material sense enjoyment?
So I'm doing something, like I'm doing a job, but how do we know that this is enough and I should not anchor for more, like I'm not doing the sense gratification for that, and I'm mentioning it that this is my duty, that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, that requires introspection into oneself, and you can notice if your material proclivities are increasing. So if you have increased tendencies for greed, for anger, for lust, then you can determine that, maybe I'm indulging in this too much. There's a very fine balance because we live in a world where we have to master the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge, both side by side. When we pull up Ishopanishad 11th verse, I think this explains it very well. Vidyam cha yas tad vedo bhayam saha avidyaya vidyam tirva vidyaya vritam ashrute.
Number?
Ishopanishad verse 11.
Yeah.
Okay, who would like to read this translation?
Only one who can blend the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality.
So this is the importance of, like you were saying, we live in a dual world where it seems like sometimes we have two lives. We have our life in the temple and we have our life outside the temple. And so it's important to understand, nescience here means ignorance, and so it's referring to our worldly deities as ignorance. So it's important for us to understand both how to live in this world and process of bhakti so that we can transcend this world. Can you control F the word? Actually, can you just scroll? That's alright. I forget what he's like. Okay, keep scrolling. Okay, stop. Okay, here. Thus, the aim of human life should not be to enjoy perverted sense enjoyment, but to cure the material disease. Aggravation of the material disease is no sign of knowledge, but a sign of avidya, ignorance. For good health, a person should not increase his fever from 105 degrees to 107 degrees, but should reduce his temperature to the normal 98.6. That should be the aim of human life. The modern trend of material civilization is to increase the feverish material condition, which has reached the point of 107 degrees in the form of atomic energy. Meanwhile, the foolish politicians are crying that at any moment the world may go to hell. I heard in a lecture once someone describing that. So we have karma, we have dhyana, we have bhakti, and bhakti is it has a way of getting rid of all of the imperfections in karma and dhyana. So when we're performing karma, we are performing activities as per Vedic injunctions, but it doesn't. It's not for the ultimate goal of life. It's there's still material motive, especially for karma kanda. There's still desire for material gain, and so that's like your temperature rising very high, 105, 107. And so some people conclude that the solution to this is to simply eliminate one's temperature and go to zero. And they practice jnana. They decide, I have nothing to do with this world, and I'm going to be completely aloof from anything. I'm just going to go somewhere and meditate. But bhakti is the supreme most process because it has a way of using our senses in a way that we don't become entangled with the material world. And so it gets rid of the deficiencies in both karma and jnana. Okay.
Jai.